If you are getting divorced, one of the questions people have besides assets is what about the debt? So, debts accumulated during the marriage are marital, regardless of whether they're in your name or your spouse's name. There could be credit cards that you didn't even know existed that accumulated during the marriage, and you're going to be responsible to pay your share of that credit card debt. So it is important to have full disclosure when you're married because you might be surprised when you get divorced that your spouse has all of this debt and you're going to be responsible for it. Your share of that, which could be 50-50, 60-40, depending on how your assets and debts are split. There are some debts, however, that the court may consider assigning, even though they're marital, assigning to your spouse. And those would be if your spouse had criminal charges and they had to pay a lawyer and there's criminal debt that accumulated as a result of that. That might be a debt that the court may, even though it's marital, assign to your spouse. Or if you have a spouse that's a gambler and they ran up a bunch of gambling debts, that may be the case where you can argue those debts should be assigned to your spouse. But general things like purchases of things in your home or other items or food that was accumulated on a credit card, even if you didn't know about it, is going to be something the court's going to probably allocate equitably the same way they would your assets, meaning you're paying towards that. There are also taxes. As a spouse, you have the option of either filing a joint tax return with your spouse or you can file separately. You never have to file a joint tax return. You can always file individually a separate return, whether you're divorced or, married or living separately. You can't file jointly once you're divorced, but sometimes there's debts left over from taxes. Tax debt is also marital. So even if you did file as a couple, the joint debt is going to be marital debt. And if you filed individually and your spouse had debt, if it accumulated during the marriage, it's also going to be marital debt and you may have to share in that. So you may want to consider filing separately once you are separate if your spouse isn't contributing enough to the taxes, something that you'll probably want to talk to your accountant about. But just keep in mind that whatever debts existed at the date of your separation, the court is going to look at and consider to be marital.